When two of the fastest minds in the superhero world collide, the city trembles. One, a hero of the streets, armed with agility, instinct, and unbreakable will. The other, a force of pure speed, a man who can outrun time itself. But tonight, they're not allies. Tonight, destiny pits them against each other in a battle neither can afford to lose. What happens when the speed of lightning meets the instinct of a spider? When webs clash with the speed force? And when an unknown force threatens to unravel everything they've ever known? Will they fight or will they fall? Tonight, it's not just about who wins. It's about who survives. Spider-Man versus the Flash, when time and fate collide. The city lay under the twilight sky, its towering skyscrapers reflecting the amber glow of the setting sun. The streets, filled with their usual hustle, carried an unusual tension. Something was about to unfold, something beyond the understanding of the people below. High above, standing atop a steel beam of a half-constructed building, was Spider-Man. His suit gleamed in the fading light, the eyes of his mask narrowing as his instincts flared with anticipation. Peter Parker had faced many adversaries before, green-suited goblins, armored madmen, and even cosmic beings that wielded the power of destruction. Yet, none of them were as fast as the one he was about to face. None of them could shatter the fabric of time with a mere sprint. This was different. This was the Flash. From the horizon came a crimson blur, a streak of lightning cutting through the city like a raging storm. The very air seemed to tremble with the sheer force of speed as Barry Allen, the Flash, came to a sudden stop in the middle of the avenue below. Dust and debris spiraled around him before settling. He looked up, meeting the watchful gaze of the web-slinger above. Peter didn't waste a second. With a well-timed flick of his wrist, he shot a web toward the adjacent building and launched himself into the air, somersaulting gracefully before landing with precision a few feet away from the Scarlet Speedster. The tension crackled like an unspoken storm between them. They weren't enemies, not exactly. But misunderstandings had bred conflicts before, and today was no different. The Flash had been tracking a powerful anomaly that threatened to disrupt the timeline, and all evidence pointed to Spider-Man being at the center of it. Peter, on the other hand, knew nothing of this supposed anomaly. He had merely sensed an unfamiliar energy, a distortion in the air, something beyond science's explanation. And now here they were, two heroes pitted against each other by fate itself. Then, in a split second, it began. The Flash moved first, his body vanishing into a blur of motion, attempting to close the distance in a heartbeat. But Spider-Man had faced speed before, albeit nothing close to Barry's level. Still, his spider sense screamed at him, warning him of the incoming attack. He twisted his body just in time, narrowly avoiding a high-speed punch that shattered the pavement where he had just stood. The sheer force sent shockwaves through the air, debris flying in every direction. Peter countered immediately, flipping over Flash and spraying webs toward him midair. The silky strands sought to entangle Barry, to slow him down, but the Flash was no ordinary opponent. He vibrated his molecules at an inhuman frequency, phasing through the webbing as if it were mere smoke. Landing gracefully, he pivoted and sent a whirlwind of punches toward Spider-Man's direction. Peter dodged with a dancer's grace, his agility and acrobatics, making him an elusive target. But Barry wasn't relying on sheer speed alone. He spun rapidly, creating a vortex of air that threatened to pull Peter in. The force of the wind made movement difficult, his webs barely clinging to the surroundings. Realizing the danger, Spider-Man leaped upward, shooting a web toward a nearby traffic light and swinging himself out of the vortex's pull. But Flash was already ahead of him, running vertically up a building, anticipating his movements with an almost supernatural precision. In an instant, he struck again, sending Spider-Man crashing into a bus. The impact crumpled the metal like paper, but Peter rolled with the force, springing back to his feet. He had to think. He had to strategize. The Flash was faster than him, possibly stronger in his own right. But Peter had one thing Barry lacked: unpredictability. He was used to fighting enemies faster and stronger than himself. He had survived battles that defied the laws of nature. He could find a way. Gritting his teeth, he shot webs in multiple directions, creating a complex network of strands. With expert control, he tugged on them in precise ways, creating tension. The entire street was now a web battlefield, and Barry had stepped right into it. The Flash moved to strike, but the webs tightened around his path, constraining his movements. He vibrated to phase through them, but Peter anticipated it. He had coated specific sections with an insulating, reinforced compound, something that even Barry's phasing ability couldn't counter easily. In that split moment of hesitation, Spider-Man struck. With a force that sent shockwaves through the web structures, he landed a direct blow. Barry reeled, momentarily dazed, and Peter followed up, using the webbing to launch himself toward the Scarlet Speedster with calculated force. Yet, Barry was not one to be held down for long. Recovering swiftly, he activated the full might of the Speed Force. The entire world seemed to slow as he moved at speeds beyond comprehension. He dodged Peter's strikes with ease, countering with a flurry of blows that left no room for evasion. Spider-Man's body felt the brunt of the attack, his suit tearing, pain flaring through his ribs. Still, he refused to fall. He had faced gods before. He had fought for his life more times than he could count. He would not lose. Not today. Summoning every ounce of will, Peter latched onto Barry's arm with his webbing, using the moment to pull himself forward instead of resisting. In a single, fluid movement, he twisted his body mid-air, using the momentum to execute a devastating counter kick. Barry staggered backward, the impact sending a ripple through the street. For a brief moment, they stood apart, breathing heavily, sizing each other up once more. Then, before either could make the next move, a sudden surge of energy enveloped the sky. The anomaly had arrived, crackling with an ominous presence. It loomed above them, shifting the battlefield in ways neither hero had anticipated. The real battle was only just beginning. As the distortion in the sky grew larger, bolts of blue energy shot down, striking the city streets and tearing through buildings. The air became thick with an unnatural pressure, the very fabric of reality wavering. Both Spider-Man and the Flash turned their attention to the anomaly, their battle momentarily forgotten. From within the rift, a shadowy figure emerged. Its form was unstable, shifting between shapes as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. Eyes glowing like molten stars, it let out a low, guttural hum that resonated through the air. Whatever it was powerful, and it was not friendly. The Flash was the first to act. In a blink, he dashed toward the creature, attempting to analyze its structure as he phased through it. But the moment he made contact, a burst of energy sent him hurtling backward, crashing into a crumbling building. Peter's instincts flared once more. This was no ordinary threat. He fired a web at the entity, only for it to dissolve upon impact. Whatever this thing was, it existed beyond the physical laws of their world. The two heroes exchanged glances. Their battle was no longer the priority. Now, they had to survive. But even as they prepared to work together, tensions still lingered between them. Each movement was calculated, each word weighed with caution. The rift had changed the game, but trust was still a luxury neither could afford. The air crackled with unstable energy as the shadowy figure loomed above the ruined street, its form shifting like a mirage caught between dimensions. The city, already bearing the scars of the earlier clash, now trembled under the weight of something far beyond human comprehension. Peter's spider sense blared in his skull like an alarm that wouldn't stop. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was something unnatural, something that threatened the very fabric of existence. Across the debris-littered street, the Flash pulled himself from the rubble, shaking off the disorienting effects of the energy blast. His suit was scorched in places, and his fingers tingled with static. He had phased through solid matter, outrun explosions, and even broken the barriers of time itself. Yet whatever force had struck him had done so with an unnatural precision, as if rejecting his very existence. He exhaled sharply, trying to focus. This wasn't just a simple anomaly, it was something more. The figure above them shifted, its glowing eyes locking onto them with an unsettling awareness. The air grew denser, charged with an invisible force that sent ripples through reality itself. Then, with a voice that echoed from 1,000 unseen places, it spoke. Correction. You are not supposed to be here. Before either of them could react, the entity raised an elongated arm, a surge of energy crackling to life. Without hesitation, Peter launched into a backflip, narrowly avoiding the blast as the street erupted in a violent explosion. Debris rained down, filling the air with smoke and dust. Barry, moving with a speed beyond human perception, barely managed to escape the shockwave, reappearing a few feet away, his mind racing. There was no doubt now, this thing wasn't just some interdimensional invader. It was unstable, shifting through existence in a way that defied all logic. Spider-Man fired a web at a nearby lamppost, swinging in an arc to strike from above. But the entity twisted, its form unraveling into pure energy before reforming behind him. Before he could react, an invisible force slammed into his chest, launching him across the street and through the shattered remains of a taxicab. Barry clenched his fists. He had to figure this out before they were both torn apart. Tapping into the speed force, he zipped around the entity, analyzing the distortions rippling from its body. It wasn't just moving through space, it was flickering through time itself. Then, in one brief instant, he saw it. Between one flicker and the next, the creature's form stabilized for just a moment, revealing something horrifying. A mask. A familiar mask. One that made Barry's stomach drop. Everything clicked into place. The energy signature, the way it moved, the way it spoke, it all pointed to one terrifying possibility. This thing wasn't just an anomaly. It was something far worse. Across the battlefield, Peter groaned as he pushed himself to his feet, his ribs aching from the impact. His suit was torn in places, and his body protested every movement. He needed a plan, fast. Looking toward Barry, he saw the unease in his expression. "Please tell me you figured something out," Peter muttered, wincing. "Because I think I dislocated my everything." Barry didn't answer immediately. His mind was still processing what he had seen. If he was right, if this was what he thought it was, then they were in far more trouble than he had ever imagined. Taking a slow breath, he finally forced the words out. "I think it's me." Peter barely had time to register the meaning of those words before the entity's glowing eyes flared brighter. The very air around them cracked, fissures of raw energy spreading across reality itself. Then, in a voice layered with time, it whispered, "You should not exist." The world shattered. The world twisted violently, a maelstrom of fractured time and reality pulling at everything around them. The streets warped, buildings stretched into impossible shapes, and the air itself seemed to splinter as if caught between past and future. Peter fought against the overwhelming force, his fingers struggling for a grip on anything solid as the pull of the anomaly threatened to tear him away. Across from him, Barry stood firm, lightning crackling around his form as he fought against the same unseen force. The entity, this distorted, unstable version of the Flash, hovered above them, its body flickering between forms, a chaotic fusion of speed and fractured time. Peter could see the struggle within it, the way its body shuddered, the way its glowing eyes flared with something almost human. Whatever this was, it wasn't fully in control. It was breaking apart. Barry clenched his jaw, his mind racing through possibilities. He had faced paradoxes before, had seen time itself unravel, but this was something else entirely. The presence before them wasn't just a rogue version of himself. It was an echo, a remnant of a future that had been erased, yet refused to disappear. A version of him that had run too fast, too far, and had become something that should never have existed. Peter knew they couldn't fight this thing head-on. It wasn't a being of flesh and blood, but of fractured timelines and unstable energy. Every strike, every attack only fed the chaos, pushing reality further into collapse. They needed another way. Bracing himself, he called out over the chaos, "Barry, if this thing is you, then it has to be tied to you somehow. Can you?" He barely finished before a shockwave of raw energy slammed into him, sending him sprawling across the warping landscape. Barry didn't respond immediately. He already knew what Peter was suggesting, but the risk was immeasurable. If he was right, then the only way to stop this was to sever the connection completely, to cut himself off from the unstable energy that had created this anomaly in the first place. It meant pushing beyond his limits, running faster than he ever had before. It meant leaving something behind. Taking a deep breath, he met Peter's gaze. There was no need for words. They both understood. Then he ran. The world blurred as Barry pushed forward, channeling every ounce of speed within him. The lightning around him intensified, crackling wildly as he broke through the barriers of time itself. The entity screeched, its form flickering violently as it was dragged into the slipstream of energy. The faster Barry ran, the more the distortion unraveled, strands of its existence peeling away into nothingness. Peter watched as the scene unfolded, his senses screaming at him that something irreversible was happening. The sky split open, and Barry, now nothing more than a streak of living lightning, vanished into the rift along with the anomaly. Then silence. The storm dissipated, the warp city slowly returning to its normal state. The buildings realigned, the cracks in reality sealed themselves, and the air grew still. Peter remained where he was, staring at the empty space where Barry had once stood. The only sign that anything had ever happened was the faint hum of residual energy in the air. Minutes passed before Peter finally let out a slow breath, his body aching from the battle, his mind reeling from a loss. Barry was gone. He had saved the world, sacrificed himself to fix what had been broken. But was he truly gone? Peter didn't know. All he knew was that somewhere in the vast and endless corridors of time, the Scarlet Speedster was still running. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find his way back. The end.